This is chapter 20, part 3. We're going to look at the valves of the heart and also the circulation. So in addition to cardiac muscle tissue, the heart wall also contains this dense connective tissue that forms the fibrous skeleton of the heart. Now essentially the fibrous skeleton consists of these 4 dense rings, or dense connective tissue rings, that surround the valves of the heart. And they fuse with one another and they merge with the interventricular septum. So they form this really strong structural foundation around the heart valves, but this fibrous skeleton also prevents overstretching of the valves as large amounts of blood pass through them. The fibrous skeleton also serves as a point of insertion for cardiac muscle fibers to attach onto, and also acts as an electrical insulator between the atria and the ventricles. So we can see these fibrous rings around each of the valves. So we have all of them around each of these valves, making that really nice structure for them, that fibrous skeleton. So as each chamber of the heart contracts, it pushes a large amount of volume into a ventricle or out of the heart into an artery. So valves are going to open and close in response to pressure changes as the heart contracts and as it relaxes. So these 4 valves really help to ensure that there's only one-way flow of blood by opening to allow blood through and then closing to stop that blood flow. And they also are built in such a way that they also prevent any backflow of blood. So we have the right and left atrioventricular valves. These are the valves between the atria and the ventricles. And then we have these semilunar valves. And the semilunar valves are the pulmonary valve, between the right ventricle and the pulmonary circulation system. So the blood going to the lungs to collect oxygen. And then the other valve is the aortic valve, or the other semilunar valve. And the aortic valve goes from the left ventricle into the systemic circulation system, so into the entire rest of the body. So those are the 2 semilunar valves. So at the top here, we have that bicuspid valve. Remember, this is the left atrioventricular valve. And when an atrioventricular valve is open, the rounded ends of the cusps are going to kind of project into the ventricle. So you can kind of see it's open here. They're kind of bending down this way, opening into the ventricle, and that allows blood to flow down from the atria into the ventricle. Now when the ventricles are relaxed, the papillary muscles are relaxed, and the chordae tendineae are going to be slack. So here we have relaxed muscles, slack chordae tendineae, meaning that the bicuspid valves are going to be open. And when we have these valves are open, the blood is going to move from a higher pressure in the atria when the atria are contracting, causing that high pressure, and they're going to flow into a lower pressure area, which in this case are the ventricles, and they're going to go through these atrioventricular valves. So this is when the atria contract and the ventricles relax. Now when the ventricles contract, the pressure of blood is actually going to drive those cusps upward until their edges meet. And this is therefore going to close the opening. Now at the same time, we're going to have the papillary muscles are going to contract, which pulls and tightens those chordae tendineae. And this prevents the valve cups from everting or from opening into the atria, from completely opening this way, because we're going to be holding everything pretty tight down. It's going to be held tight so that it's completely closed, and we're not going to evert, allowing blood to go back into the atria that way. Now, if the atrioventricular valves or the chordae tendineae are damaged, we might have blood that actually flows back into the atria when the ventricles contract. So this is not normal. Now, the aortic valve and the pulmonary valve are known as the semilunar valves, and this is because they're made up of 3 crescent moon-shaped cusps. So each of them has these 3 crescent cusps, you can see. So each cusp attaches to the arterial wall by its convex outer margin, you can see here. And the semilunar valves allow ejection of blood from the heart into arteries, but prevent backflow from the blood into the ventricles. The free borders of the cusps project into the lumen of the artery when they're open. So you see when they're open, they don't open into the ventricle, but instead they're going to open into the artery. And that's because the blood is flowing from the ventricle into the artery. So blood pressure is going outwards. When the ventricles contract, they're going to build up that pressure within the chambers, and then the semilunar valves are opening when the pressure in the ventricle exceeds the pressure in the arteries. And this allows the ejection of blood from ventricles into the pulmonary trunk and into the aorta. So the pulmonary valve is going to open into the pulmonary trunk, and the aortic valve is going to open up into the aorta. One other important thing to note, that when one set of valves is open, say the semilunar, so here on the right side, this is where we have the semilunar valves open. This is when the atrioventricular valves are closed. And same with vice versa. Here on the left side, we have the atrioventricular valves are open and the semilunar valves are closed. And this is because we need to be able to build that pressure, and we also need to fill the atria with blood before it just goes straight into the ventricles. So when the atrioventricular valves are open, this is when we have blood moving from the atria into the ventricles, and the semilunar valves are closed, so we're going to be filling those ventricles of blood before they pump them elsewhere in the body. And on the other hand, when the atrioventricular valves are closed, this is when we're going to be filling the atria with blood, and the blood is going to be leaving the ventricles through the semilunar valves. After birth, the heart pumps blood into 2 closed circuits with every beat. We have the systemic or body circulation and the pulmonary or lung circulation. Now the 2 circuits are actually arranged in series, where the output of one becomes the input of the other. And so this is the same thing that would happen, for example, if you attached 2 garden hoses to one another. So this picture on the left here, we have kind of the flow of blood within the heart. So first off, on the right side of the heart, the right atria here, the right side of the heart is going to be the pump for pulmonary circulation. So it receives this dark red deoxygenated blood that's returning from the body. So the blood has gone to muscles and organs, it's released all of its oxygen, and now it's coming back without any oxygen to the heart. So we're going to come here to the right atrium, so that the left and right pictures here kind of correspond. One is just looking at the heart, and the right one is just looking at it more in text form. So we have this deoxygenated blood indicated here in blue in both sides is deoxygenated. So we're gonna come here through, we're gonna use this in blue, through the tricuspid valve here into the right ventricle, and then we're going to flow up through that pulmonary valve into the pulmonary trunk and arteries, and you can follow that here on the right side too, through the pulmonary valve to the pulmonary trunk and arteries. And then from that pulmonary trunk and arteries, we're going to go to either the left lung or the right lung. Now in the pulmonary circulation, this deoxygenated blood is going to go to the lungs, and it's going to lose its CO2 and pick up some oxygen, so it becomes oxygenated. So then it's going to come back to the heart. So right here, you can actually, on the right side of this heart, you can see it coming back to the heart from the lungs. So this is coming in by the pulmonary veins. We're coming into the left atrium here. We're going to travel through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle, and then through the aortic valve here, which comes back behind this pulmonary valve, and into the aorta and the aortic arch. And then we're going to go through these aortic arteries to all places of the body. So again, you can follow this on here. It goes through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle, through the aortic valve, through the aorta, and those systemic arteries into the systemic circulation. So through the systemic circulation, we're going to go to those systemic capillaries, where we're going to bring that oxygen and release it through those capillaries. So we're going to bring oxygen to the trunk and the lower limbs at the bottom, and we're also going to bring it to the head and upper limbs. So we're going to release oxygen to muscles and organs. We're going to release that oxygen into the interstitial space to be used by cells in the body. And once the blood all loses its oxygen, the red blood cells are releasing its oxygen, they also pick up CO2 from that interstitial space around muscles and organs. So now the blood has CO2 and no oxygen, so it's deoxygenated. So then we travel back to the heart by the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and the coronary sinuses. So then we're going to be coming, well, we'll do it in blue here because now it's deoxygenated. We're going to come back to the heart and back to that right atria. And we're going to start the cycle all over again. So these are the two circulations that we have in our body. And that's going to be the end of Chapter 20, Part 3.